Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about a truth most people never see on the surface, a truth that sits behind the calm face of an avoidant after they reject you, after they push you away, after they act like you never mattered. The truth is this: your silence after their rejection has destroyed them far more than you will ever know, not because they will show it, not because they will admit it, but because silence does what no argument, no pleading, no long message ever could. It forces them to face themselves. Avoidant psychology is built on escape. When they feel too close, they pull away. When emotions rise, they shut down. When you need reassurance, they disappear into space and time to think. They reject openly, or they reject quietly with distance and coldness. On the outside, they look strong, unbothered, even relieved. You see them moving on, posting like nothing happened, acting as if your love was a chapter they closed with ease. And you're sitting with a shattered heart, replaying every moment trying to understand how they could let you go so easily. Your silence destroys the illusion that they could always come back to you, and that illusion was the secret pillow their ego slept on every night. Avoidants reject people with a safety net in their mind. When they distance, when they shut down, when they say, "I'm not ready," or "this isn't working," they don't fully feel the risk of that decision because, deep down, they believe you'll still be there. They assume you'll answer if they text. They assume you'll pick up if they call. They assume that no matter how cold they were, no matter how many times they rejected your needs, there is always a version of you waiting, hurting, but available. That belief allows them to walk away without facing the full weight of what they're losing. It lets them think, "I'm not losing them forever, I'm just taking a break from the intensity." So their rejection doesn't feel dangerous to them, because in their mind, it's not final. It's not a true ending, it's a pause, under their control on their terms. But your silence shatters that fantasy. When they finally turn around to see if you're still at the emotional doorway, and you're no longer there, that's when reality hits. It doesn't hit when they block your calls. It doesn't hit when they send the "I need space" message. It hits the moment those actions stop giving them the outcome they're used to. They're used to your persistence. They're used to your heart circling back. They're used to being the one who decides when the story starts and when it stops. Your silence is the first time in this entire dynamic where you decide. And that decision becomes a kind of emotional earthquake in their system, because it reveals something they've avoided all along: you were always free to leave. Avoidant psychology thrives on the belief that they're in control of attachment. I can stay if I want, I can leave if I want, I can come back if I want. Your chasing, your explaining, your constant availability reinforced that belief. It gave them a sense of emotional superiority, even if they never admitted it. It let them believe that love was a resource that would always be there for them to draw from when they felt lonely, insecure, or nostalgic. They may not have wanted all of you, but they wanted to know they could access you. That's what their ego fed on, not just your love, but your predictability. Then comes the silence. At first, they interpret it as temporary. They're just mad. They need time. They'll reach out again, they always do. Their ego pulls old receipts, reminding them of all the times you came back after being hurt. But as the days turn into weeks, and the weeks into a strange, echoing space where nothing comes from you at all, their mind recalculates. The story they've always told themselves, "I can go back if I want to," starts to feel shaky. They check your profile, they see you posting, living, maybe even smiling, and it hits them you're not frozen in time over them. You're moving. And in that movement, the illusion that you belonged emotionally to them begins to crumble. This is where their ego secretly begins to break, because the avoidant has to face the possibility that they didn't just take space. They lost you. There's a huge psychological difference between believing, "I stepped away, but they're still there," and realizing, "I stepped away and they're gone." The first is comforting. The second is confronting. When they realize your silence isn't a performance but a boundary, their rejection stops feeling like a clever emotional strategy and starts looking like self-sabotage. They remember the look on your face when you tried to connect. They replay the messages you sent that they left on read. They hear your words, the ones they brushed off as too much. And suddenly they don't sound dramatic. They sound honest. The illusion that they could always come back was what allowed them to be careless. It's easy to walk away from something you've convinced yourself you'll always have access to, but your silence turns that open door into a closed one. The power dynamic flips. For the first time, they want something from you: attention, reaction, proof that they still exist in your emotional world, and they don't get it. That denial is not revenge, it's reality. It shows them that their choices were never without consequence, that your love wasn't an endless tap they could turn on and off without cost. They didn't just reject someone who would always be there. They rejected someone who had the strength to walk away. Deep down, whether they ever admit it or not, that realization cuts through the armor they've spent years building. They are confronted with a truth their ego never wanted to face. They were never as in control as they thought. Your silence proves that love is not a permanent guarantee, but a living thing that withdraws when it's mishandled. And once that illusion is gone, they can't go back to the comfortable lie that rejection is safe, that they can always return whenever they're ready. Your silence teaches them, in the most powerful way possible, that you were a choice with an expiration date, and their ego has to live with the knowledge that they let it pass. Silence forces them to confront emotions they've avoided their entire lives, because as long as you were reaching out, explaining, apologizing, chasing, they never had to sit alone with the truth of what they did or what they felt. Your presence absorbed the weight for them. Your energy carried the emotional burden. Your attempts to fix the connection allowed them to stay comfortably numb. But when you go quiet, when you stop sending the long messages, when you stop trying to talk it out with someone who keeps shutting down, something powerful happens. The noise outside them fades, and the noise inside them gets louder. And that is exactly what the avoidant has spent a lifetime trying to escape: the inner noise, the feelings, the memories, the fear, the guilt, the grief they never processed. Avoidants are experts in emotional anesthesia. They have trained themselves to numb rather than feel, to rationalize instead of reflect, to detach instead of digest their emotions. When something hurts, they push it away. When someone gets close, they push them away too. They tell themselves stories like, "I'm just not emotional," or "I don't need anyone," or "I'm better alone." But those are not truths, they're shields, and you, with your big heart and endless effort, unknowingly became part of that shield, because every time they pulled away and you followed, every time they shut down and you tried harder, you gave them a buffer from themselves. They didn't have to feel the full impact of their decisions. They didn't have to feel loss. They didn't have to feel regret. They could lean on the quiet assurance that you were still emotionally available. Even when they were not, their avoidance thrived because you were still there. Then comes the silence, and this time it's different. This time you don't send the "we need to talk" text. You don't ask them, "What's wrong?" You don't chase the closure they never know how to give. Instead, you sit in your own pain. You decide to heal, and your energy begins to withdraw from their world. They might not react instantly. In fact, at first they may feel relief. Their nervous system is used to associating distance with safety, so the beginning of silence often feels like peace for them. But that peace is just the absence of pressure, not the presence of healing. It's the calm before the emotional storm, because your silence isn't just distance, it's an interruption. It cuts their pattern in half. It breaks the cycle where they run and you follow. Suddenly there's no one chasing, no one regulating the emotional climate for them, and for the first time, there is space for their real feelings to surface. At first those feelings creep in as questions. They think, why haven't they reached out yet? They always do. They check their phone more often than they'd like to admit. They open your chat, scroll up, reread your last messages, maybe the ones they left unanswered. They feel a strange tug in their chest, and they quickly close it. They distract themselves with work, with friends, with scrolling, with anything that keeps them from staying too long in that uncomfortable space. But silence waits. Silence doesn't chase, doesn't soothe, it doesn't argue. It simply sits there like a mirror, reflecting everything they've done and everything they've avoided feeling about it. And slowly, the defenses they built start to crack. Guilt begins to show up, not always as, "I was wrong," at first, but as a heaviness, as a restless night, as a tightness in their chest when your name comes to mind. They remember the times you tried to talk about how you felt and they brushed you off. the moments they rolled their eyes, minimized your pain, or shut you down with, "You're overthinking it." In the silence, those scenes replay differently, without their ego narrating over them, and they begin to see how much you were trying to connect, not control, how much you were trying to be close, not clingy, and that realization stings, because now there is no new text from you to reassure them that despite everything, they're still wanted. There is no, "I miss you," from you to soothe the discomfort rising inside them. They just have to sit with it, and that is unfamiliar, that is terrifying, that is growth trying to happen. They also begin to feel something they've repressed for a long time: loss. Avoidants prefer to leave before they feel left. They prefer to reject before they feel rejected. It's how they stay one step ahead of pain. But your silence flips that script. It forces them into the role they never prepared for. The one who wonders, the one who waits, the one who feels unsure. They start asking themselves, "Did I go too far this time? Did I lose them for real? Was this the one person who actually loved me and I pushed them away?" And those questions are not casual. They cut into the core belief that distance keeps them safe. They feel a hollow space where your energy used to be. And that emptiness isn't just about missing you, it's about facing the truth that their coping mechanism has consequences, real, permanent ones. Silence is powerful because it takes away their favorite escape route. Blame. As long as you were reacting, reaching, crying, pushing, they could say, "See, they're too emotional, they're the problem, they're overwhelming." But when you are simply gone, when you are calm and quiet, and no longer available, they lose that shield. If they feel pain now, if they feel regret now, if they feel lonely now, they can't pin it on you. There is no drama, no argument, no scene to point to. There is only their choice and its outcome, their rejection and its emptiness, their fear and its cost. And that is when avoidance stops working, because it can no longer protect them from themselves. Will every avoidant suddenly become emotionally mature because of your silence? No, some will run further, some will bury the feelings deeper, some will distract harder. But whether they act on it or not, your silence has still forced something to the surface. It has made them feel, really feel, that love is not an infinite resource they can keep rejecting without consequence. It has made them sit, maybe for the first time, with the reality that their patterns hurt people, and eventually hurt them too. And even if they never tell you, that inner confrontation is the beginning of something they never allowed before: awareness. And awareness is where real change always starts. Your absence reveals how dependent they were on your emotional energy, and that's the part they never wanted to admit. To you, to anyone, and especially not to themselves. On the surface, the avoidant prides themselves on being independent, untouched, in control. They say things like, "I don't need anyone. I'm better alone. I'm not emotional like that." They build an identity around not relying on anyone. But what they never realize, until you're gone, is how much they were quietly feeding off your emotional presence the entire time. They didn't want your neediness, but they lived off your consistency. They didn't want your vulnerability, but they leaned on your reliability. They didn't want your intensity, but your intensity was the only thing keeping the connection alive. Your emotional energy did something for them that they couldn't do for themselves. It regulated their world. When they shut down, you checked in. When they went distant, you reached out. When they were cold, you warmed the space. You were the emotional thermostat of the relationship, always adjusting to keep things workable, bearable, connected. They didn't have to initiate, because you did. They didn't have to repair conflict, because you tried. They didn't have to dig deep, because you were always the one bringing depth to the table. They mistook this balance as natural, not realizing they were quietly depending on you to keep the emotional thread alive. Then one day, you stopped. Not dramatically, not with a big announcement. You just stopped pouring. You woke up exhausted from over-explaining, over-giving, over-trying while they stayed detached. You finally chose yourself, and your absence, your energetic withdrawal, didn't just leave an empty space where your messages used to be. It unplugged them from the emotional life support they didn't know they were on. They were so used to having you as a constant emotional background, like soft music in a room, that they didn't notice how much it held the atmosphere together until the music was gone. At first, they might tell themselves nothing has changed. They go about their routine, they distract themselves, they insist they're fine. But slowly, small things begin to feel off. The good mornings don't come. The "did you get home safe" doesn't pop up. The "how was your day" never shows. All the tiny moments where your care once held them are now empty. They feel a strange, unfamiliar quiet. They're not used to having to ask for emotional connection. They always just received it. Your absence exposes that they weren't as self-sufficient as they pretended. They were simply outsourcing their emotional needs to you without giving you the credit or the same nourishment back. They feel it in the evenings when the world slows down, when they pick up their phone and realize no one is checking on them the way you did. No one is listening to their rants, their small victories, their stress, their random thoughts. Your emotional energy used to hold space for their humanity, even when they insisted they didn't need that space. They may have rolled their eyes at your depth, but they sank into the comfort of knowing you were there. Now, your absence shows them just how much they relied on that comfort. Dependency doesn't always look like clinging. Sometimes it looks like assuming you'll always be there. They depended on you not by chasing you, but by expecting you. Expecting your love, expecting your forgiveness, expecting your understanding, expecting your presence. And your absence is the first time they've had to live without that expectation being met. They feel something missing. And it's not just you as a person. It's the emotional safety you provided without ever being properly acknowledged. Your emotional energy was the light in a room they had grown used to. They may have not thanked you for turning it on, but they sure got comfortable living in it. When you finally flicked that switch off and walked out, they were forced to sit in their own darkness. For the first time, they had to confront how empty things feel without someone there to translate, soften, and soothe the emotional edges of their life. That's when the truth begins to dawn. Not only did you matter, you were holding far more of the emotional weight than they ever noticed. And here's where the ego cracks see. They were so sure they were the detached one, the one who felt less, the one in control. But when you step away, and they still find themselves checking your profile, scrolling your old messages, replaying how safe it felt when you were in their corner, they are forced to admit something internally. They needed you. They needed your warmth, your emotional intelligence, your care. They needed the feeling of being loved by someone who didn't give up at the first sign of difficulty. Your absence doesn't just show them that you're gone. It shows them how much they were leaning on you while pretending they weren't leaning at all. They may never say it out loud. Avoidants rarely do. They might act indifferent. They might double down on the "I'm fine. I don't need anyone." They might even run to someone new to recreate the same dynamic. But inside, the imprint of your emotional presence and the stark contrast